Hi, I'm Larry Dignan, and we're here with Ashok Srivastava, the Chief Data Officer at Intuit. Walk me through what you're doing with weather data, NASA, and sort of the open data sets and how it applies to small business.
Yeah, so Larry, it's great to be here. I've had a long interest in the use of different types of data to understand what's happening in our society. And I used to work for NASA many years ago. And while I was there, I started to see that climate data and the other types of data that they got from their remote sensing systems could be really valuable. And when I transitioned and moved to Intuit a few years ago, I started to think about it. The fact is that today we're not including NASA data in our models or in any of our AI applications, but it's something that we're thinking about and potentially exploring as an area. What we're really focused on right now is using the data that Intuit already has in order to people help people make better financial decisions.
So, how does weather data play into business, and especially small businesses as they're doing forecasting and things like that? How do you think you would go about using it?
So here's what's amazing about the small business climate and the community is that these businesses are going up against all odds. And what we're trying to do is think of ways that they can use data and artificial intelligence and machine learning to do a better job at making the decisions that they make on a daily basis. So the weather has a key role to play. For instance, if you think about companies that might be on the Gulf Coast of the United States, they have a lot of weather patterns come through in terms of hurricanes, but also in terms of uh, more rain, less rain on a given day. This kind of information and knowing what's going to happen is really critical. And so, what we're trying to do is help people get better visibility into what's coming, and weather could be a key part of that.
What are some of the other data sets, whether it's at NASA or any place else, that would be of interest to small businesses?
So I think that weather data and climate data are one type of data. As we're seeing today, data about health and trends in health are very important. Anything that a small business can use to help them understand the world around them and their customer base, I think is going to be very critical.
Yeah. So what's some of the grunt work involved with ingesting this data and putting it to use in your models?
That's a really interesting question, Larry. The data that we get from satellites, let's just talk about that for a moment, tends to be what we call spatial temporal time series. So these are like pictures that evolve over time, much like videos. And to take that kind of information, which is granular, and to tie it with transactional data that we might get from, let's say, credit card information or invoicing, is actually not easy. And so we would need to think through how that's done. Um, in some cases, in the earth sciences, this is called a data fusion problem, how you bring different levels of data and different granularities of data together. So that would be one of the key challenges that we would face.
What about the data cleansing and things like that? I just know with open data, generally speaking, whether it's NASA or wherever, there tends to be a decent amount of work needed to clean it and make sure it works within your systems. Is that something you would have to conquer?
Absolutely. So clean data and ensuring that we understand the data as it comes in, that's part of the cleaning process, is to not only make sure that the quality is good, but to make sure that we understand what the data actually means about the real world. That's an important part of the overall journey of bringing in any new data set, whether or not it's an open data set or not.
What are some of the other open data areas that might be of use to Intuit?
So I think that data sets about the small businesses that are out there, about macroeconomic indicators, I think are very important. Indicators about how people are using apps and their mobile devices would be really important. I think that information about travel and other types of movements that people make would be important because it gives us kind of a big picture that could help a small business really understand what's happening in their immediate uh, customer base.
So is the big issue that small business is very micro focused, and you're trying to bring some data in the higher end of the funnel to sort of frame it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to create ways for small businesses to know and understand their customer base better, and also to know and understand what's happening in the micro and then the larger macroeconomic climate for them to essentially help them mitigate risk. Because a lot of small businesses face risks, as do larger businesses. We want to give them the tools and technologies that they need in order to understand that risk and to mitigate it.
Would crime data be, an interest in terms of the, open data and how it applies to small businesses?
Absolutely. I haven't thought through, and we haven't included that type of data before, but if that kind of information is relevant to small businesses and at face level, it sounds like it would be, it could be interesting. I think that anything that a small business can bring together in order to understand what's happening in their immediate surroundings and what's happening with their customer base would be really important.
So like census data would probably be really valuable over time.
Absolutely. Census data, I think, would be very interesting for small businesses to look at.
And then I guess what's the roadmap for the weather data and, when would we see this in the models and be in play?
So right now we're at our very initial stages, and I don't know, in fact, whether or not that specific data is going to come into our models. We'd have to look at it and build that roadmap. But what I can tell you is that we're interested in data sets that are publicly available that can really help us understand the risks that our customers face and give them the ability to mitigate those risks.
And on the small business side, what would business owners have to do to, sort of activate these things? I mean, would this be something just shows up within the application, or is it something that's sort of almost invisible in that, the recommendations takes this into account, but the small business doesn't need to know per se that weather's in the equation?
Yeah, I think it could be both. It really depends on the application and the use case that we're driving. What we want to do is create experiences that really let the small business owner make the right decision. And if that means being explicit about the data and about the recommendation based on data, that's one track. And if it's just a piece of information that goes into a more comprehensive model that helps them make better decisions, that could be another track. So we want to take a look at both. And in fact, that's the way we use data today.
All right. Anything I didn't ask that I should have?
Larry, I think that we're at a phase as a society where we want to understand the world around us and we want to use that information to help small businesses prosper and the consumers prosper as well. And so we're always trying to think about new ways to bring in information and new ways to render that information so that people really can make the best financial decisions for themselves.
All right. Thanks for joining us.